Welcome back to the channels, ladies and gents. I apologize for the long break in between my videos. Just needed some time off after Hot D Season 2. As you all know, I was a little disappointed, as most people were. A little bit, obviously, was not just the writers and directors. HBO kind of screwed them and cut two short episodes, so I don't want to totally blame the writers and producers, but let's not talk about that today. And I had some work and I needed to study for an exam. Taking at work, so I couldn't make any videos. So I do apologize, guys, but I'm back. Um, Next few videos, I'll be breaking down Aegon's Conquest, guys. Most of the breakdown will just consist of the events in history, but I will try to throw some random fun facts about these pre-Aegon Conquest houses, as well as some theories I have. The map I drew, guys, is based off of pages 10 to 12 in Fire and Blood at the very beginning of the Conquest. But with that being said, please like and subscribe, and let's get into the part one content, what I am calling the prelude of the Conquest. So let's get into it, guys. So today, guys, I just have I have a Starbucks coffee. It's a little too early to have a beer here, even though it is a football Sunday. Go Bears! But yeah, it's 10:30 here, so I'm gonna stick with the coffee. All right, guys, the background. So the first two quotes give you background information to how long the conquest actually lasted, around 2 years. And Aegon was actually not coronated until technically year zero in Westerosi history. Aegon's conquest was so significant, i.e., kind of similar to Jesus Christ's birth, AD, BC, that Westerosi calendars base the time on his conquest. BC is before conquest, and then AC is after conquest. So in House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, you're only going to hear like, and the new Dunk and Egg series, you'd only hear like after conquest. But if we saw like, I don't know, like a Nymeria show or something, it would be BC, obviously. The Targaryens moved to Dragonstone under Aenar Targaryen, which would have been like the Conqueror's like great 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 grandfather. Because his daughter Daenerys the Dreamer, the first believed rider of Balerion the Black Dread, which we got a hint of that in I think the show, and like one of the after parts of House of the Dragon. So she was a dragon dreamer like Viserys and Helena. That basically Valyria would explode would explode in the future. So Aenar and Daenys and all of his family, as you can see in the third quote, he took them from Valyria all the way to Dragonstone, which was the westernmost out point of the Valyrian Freehold. So actually, Dragonstone was controlled by the Valyrian Freehold. It was the most western part of the Valyrian Freehold. And let's see what else. So, um, the only dragon we know of who was brought from Old Valyria to Dragonstone was Balerion the Black Dread. One day the Mount of Aegon the Conqueror. Again, we'll get into that. But yeah, so just the background here, guys. The Targaryens left Valyria because there was going to be a big explosion. They landed on Dragonstone, and that's what happened 100 years before Aegon's birth. So let's get into the siblings, also known as the future conquerors. So Aegon and his sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, were all dragon riders. Aegon rode Balerion, Visenya rode Vhagar, and Rhaenys rode Meraxes. Meraxes was silver and the middle-sized dragon. Vhagar we know is green and is the smallest dragon. Imagine a tiny Vhagar. I think that's hilarious. And because we're used to it's like huge Vhagar, but at this time Vhagar would have been like 25 years old. So Vhagar would be like the size of probably like Moon Dancer Vermax at this point. And then obviously Balerion was the dark black dragon. Kind of looks like Drogon. Kind of looks like, well, yeah, Drogon looks like Balerion. And there's kind of this whole like theory about like black dragons. So you could find some YouTube videos on that. It's like all the black dragons for some reason are like really big, like Balerion, Drogon, and Cannibal. They're all like the three biggest dragons, and they're all black. So there's some like theory about that. Um, so all of them were all of them and their riders were born on Dragonstone, except Balerion. Because remember, Balerion came over from Old Valyria to Dragonstone. Balerion was born in Old Valyria. But the rest of them, Meraxes, Vhagar, Visenya, Aegon, Rhaenys, they were all born on Dragonstone. Um, oh yeah, and the Conqueror's kids are actually 25% Valerion. All right, excuse me, the Conqueror, not the So Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya are 25% Valerian because their mother was half Valerian, half Targaryen. So that's kind of fun. Aegon was known as somewhat of an enigma. No one could really read him. We now know from the show, which has been confirmed by George, that Aegon's motivation to conquer Westeros was from a dream to basically defeat the White Walkers, which he knew was inevitably going to come. But other than that, we do not know much about Aegon's personality, other than he was stoic and a somewhat serious person. We do know he seemed to be like generally a good ruler though too. Visenya is written as the darkest of all the siblings. She is like into blood magic and dark stuff, basically, and is almost written as like pretty much evil. That's actually like why when Rhaenyra in season 2 of House of the Dragon, when reading books about Visenya, Jace is like, "I hope you're not looking up to her." There's like actually a part about that in House of the Dragon, and ironically, Daemon and Rhaenyra were going to name their daughter that died Visenya, but that's not a very common Targaryen female name because Visenya is kind of like iffy. She's kind of considered gray in like Targaryen history, like good in certain ways, bad in certain ways. Where Rhaenys, Targaryen, the youngest of the conquerors, she obviously was not named after, but she was like the reason Rhaenys in House of the Dragons named Rhaenys is because of Rhaenys the Conqueror. God, I couldn't get that out. Sorry about that, but I think you all knew what I meant. Um, and again, Visenya is the future mother of one of the worst and most brutal kings of Westeros. Some people argue otherwise. That's kind of interesting theory. But Maegor the Cruel, real quick, since this is a relatively short video, basically there's some people that argue that Maegor the Cruel like wasn't that bad because he basically saved the Targaryen dynasty from the Faith of the Seven, which is kind of an interesting like thought. But overall, he was pretty brutal, and I would say he was more evil than good. But some argue that he kind of saved the Targaryen dynasty. You that would take a whole video by itself, and there's some other stuff on YouTube. I'm sure you could look up if you're interested by that. Rhaenys is written as lighthearted and playful, and she loved to ride Meraxes. She would spend countless hours riding her dragon, and it is said that Aegon preferred the company of Rhaenys over Visenya. It is also said that he married Rhaenys for love and Visenya out of duty. So that's a little bit about the siblings and the conquerors, the siblings, their dragons, and a little bit about their personalities. But let's get into Westeros before the Conquest, Part 1. So you can see in my map, referring to the quarrelsome kingdoms in quote 1, that I drew divided borders in the Reach, Dorne, Stormlands, Riverlands, and the present Crown Lands. These kingdoms did not all really get along too well, besides maybe the Reach and Westerlands. Probably the Reach and Westerlands got along the best, and you'll find that out later on in this video series. We'll talk about the Reach and Westerlands alliance. So as you can see, there are 3 kingdoms during this time who you would not recognize in either Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Specifically, one is on the screen, the other 4 you would. But the Gardeners, the Whores, and the Durandons. I do wonder what's going to happen in the Conquest there. So stick around to find out, guys. But I'm going to get into some more details about the most quarrelsome kingdoms at this time in the next few slides. The other 5 kingdoms at this point are relatively stable and chill and not as interesting, so I will not go into as much detail about them. But let's do Westeros before the Conquest Part 2, specifically talking about the Whores. Yes, that's like how it's pronounced, the Whores. Harren the Black. Anyways, so we will get into much more detail about Harren the Black, the Whores, and the River Iron Lords in the next video, but here I will just give you a brief introduction on his character and the lands he rules. So in that first quote, you were probably confused as why there isn't Harren's blue coloring on the map over Rosby and Duskendale. You see Aegon's black coloring over that. That, again, guys, is because I based this map off of pages 10 to 12 in Fire and Blood, and we're not there yet. So we still need to wait for Aegon's Landing, which we will get to at the end of this video. But essentially at this time, Harren rules over the Iron Islands and the Riverlands. Harren's family is originally from the island Orkmont in the Iron Islands, the island just north of Pike. So I did do the Pike sigil. As you can see, the Iron Islands to the left of the screen with the blue islands. The Orkmont is basically that one like smack in the center. But he and his family extended all the way from the Iron Islands to the east coast of Westeros, which is actually pretty impressive. So at this point, like You could maybe argue that Harren the Whore is probably like maybe the most powerful king at Westeros in this time. You could argue that. Um, and so Harren the Black is the guy who constructed Harrenhal. It all makes sense now. That's fun. But yeah, basically he enslaved Riverlanders to build Harrenhal, and it took 40 years to build. The guy is absolutely brutal and bloodthirsty, but again, we will get more into him later on in this video series, specifically in the next video. Let's move on to Argilac the Arrogant in the Stormlands. So Westeros Before the Conquest Part 3. Sorry guys, it's a lot of quotes here, but I mean, I think these are pretty powerful, so I do recommend reading them. The Durandons of Storm's End, like said in the quote, used to rule the entirety of the eastern half of Westeros, but due to the incursions by all their neighbors, the Whores, the Martells, and the Gardeners, they lost quite a bit of land by the time of Aegon's conquest. You can see that with the disputed borders I drew. Also, guys, have you noticed in the top left that their sigil is the same as the Baratheons? We'll also get into that more in the next video. Argilac the Arrogant was pretty much a badass, probably considered one of the better warriors in Westeros at his peak ability. However, his prowess at battle will basically lead him to overbelieving himself, kind of hence the name Argilac the Arrogant. But to save space and from all you reading too much, I cut a bit of that third quote out. But essentially, Argilac reaches out to Aegon because he feels threatened by Harren the Black and the River/Iron Lords encroaching on his lands. As you can see, there's a disputed border between the yellow and blue lands just north of the Kingswood. But of course, the irony of this proposal is that Argilac does not even control the territory he offered to Aegon. So Harren does at this point. So it goes on, and Aegon, of course, rejects his offer because of this, and because, Aegon already has 2 wives. Aegon's already a player, guys. So I guess an incest player. Incest is bad, kids. So Aegon makes him a counteroffer, asking for Massey's Hook, the North Kingswood, and a bit of the Northeast Reach. Again, I don't even totally understand why Aegon did that, because I think Aegon knows that he doesn't even control those lands. But anyways, and Argilac's daughter would marry Orys Baratheon, not Aegon. So Orys Baratheon, guys, is obviously a pretty significant character. He's the half-born bastard brother of Aegon Targaryen. And a fun fact, I might have said this in one of my videos, but I think this is kind of a cool fact. Orys Baratheon was actually a Targaryen on his father's side. Aegon and Orys shared the same father, Aerion Targaryen. But the distinct black hair of the Baratheons we get into so much detail about in Game of Thrones in season 1, which almost kind of kicks the plot off or kicks the War of the Five Kings off, is most likely from Orys's mother. So yeah, that's kind of a cool fact, I thought. But this then leads us into the fourth quote. Argilac, you could tell, is pretty brutal, kind of Daemon Targaryen move, TBH, cutting that guy his hand off and sending it back to Aegon. But that's pretty much all I have to say there. Let's get into the next topic to see Aegon's reply. All right, guys, Aegon's Landing. So right off the bat, guys, this last section is called Aegon's Landing because, of course, this is when Aegon sets sails with his allies to modern-day King's Landing, and this is essentially how King's Landing got its name. The first quote, guys, is following again right after Aegon sees Argilac's defiance, and this is when he is fed up and he calls his bannermen. All houses, lands, and lords that would eventually become a part of the Crown lands after the conquest. The Velaryons, the Masseys, the Bar-Emmons, the Celtigars. So these are the OG allies of the Targaryens. The Velaryons, the Masseys, the Bar-Emmons, and the Celtigars. Even though technically the Masseys and Bar-Emmons are under Argilac's control, they're like, nah, we don't like that guy. We're closer with Aegon. We're gonna side with the guy with the 3 big dragons. I would probably do the same. But that third quote I thought is pretty powerful. Aegon is sending a message. Kind of makes me think of Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. But I guess here that does not really totally make sense because Aegon is the one who is starting the conflict in a sense. But from this quote, you can tell Aegon is firm but fair. He is not irrational like Harren or Argilac. Aegon's definitely not irrational. So the fourth quote will be the last part of this video that will lead into the next video, part 2. Aegon's army was small, and they sailed from Dragonstone to the mouth of the Blackwater Rush to a small fishing village that would one day hold 1 million Westerosi and would be known as King's Landing. Kind of fun. So you can see what King's Landing actually looked like then with the good art, the very solid artwork in the top right. But I think that's it for me today, guys, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pretty quick video. I'm going to be coming out with part 2 hopefully in the next month. So again, guys, this was kind of just the prelude. I wanted to just lead up to the events of what, started the war. Basically, Argilac pissing Aegon off, but we know Aegon was going to invade anyways because Aegon's dream was that he has to save Westeros from this spooky ice zombies. So again, look out for part 2. I really appreciate y'all watching the video, and again, please like and subscribe. Thanks, y'all.